Welcome to Flywheel Leadership. I'm Graham Peely, and I'm joined by Gal Borenstein of Borenstein Group. We're going to walk through Gal's journey and share what brought him here today. And let's get into it. Gal, what's your superpower, and how does that show up in the work you do for others?
If I had to pick a superpower, I have a few that I can't share, but the one that really work in business is to really uh, take a problem and reverse engineer it to a solution. Most people kind of tend to say, let's kind of build a solution, but the best solution is built by reverse engineering it to the problem and identifying the best ways to solve it. And being that in branding and marketing, which is kind of what I do, and my agency, the Borenstein Group, does, it really boils down to that. If you're able to kind of solve the issue based on authenticity and trust, that's really what makes the difference.
What does making creativity a science mean to you?
Well, that's our tagline since I started the agency 30 years ago. I was looking to niche our agency as a startup at a time, and now as an adult company, if you will, focusing really on the concept of the fact that if you're marketing to engineers and technologists, which is kind of most of the new economy, when you think about it, anybody can come to the room and have a great idea. And that's great. And it could be the biggest idea that you ever had. But if you can't take that idea and replicate it to produce repeatable and predictable outcomes, what's likely to happen is that your idea cannot scale in a marketplace. So we kind of connected the idea that creativity is not a science, it's arts. But as agencies, as branding people, we have to connect it to what would work repeatedly. Because if you don't, that's when you see like companies having 6 different commercials because none of them actually works the way that they plan to, or go out of business for the reason that they have the wrong promise that has been scaled and cannot be met by demand.
Gal, take us through your journey and how it led you to your current role in Borenstein Group. I know that's not new, but I would love to hear kind of how you got here and where we're at today.
Well, the journey started really out of necessity. Had a bachelor's degree from Temple University in Philadelphia in radio, television, and film, which I finished in 2.5 years because I was 21 and I was an immigrant that came from Israel. And I didn't have any friends here. I didn't have any family. So the only thing I could focus on was getting 17 credits that cost the same as 12 credits, which in the dorms, nobody recognizes that that's the case. So I focus on finishing school because my question in my head is, what's next? And what's next really was kind of the burgeoning economy that was about to explode. If you remember a little company like AOL, a little company like Netscape, they all had like 50 employees at the time. And then there were bulletin boards, but everything was about to go into what we now know as apps and browsers, and most importantly, an emphasis not only on messaging, but UI and UX, which is user experience and user interface in whatever we touch, right? When we get the iPhone, if it's not designed ergonomically, if you will, in people's heads, it doesn't matter what the app is, or it's the wrong color. You may never see it again. So in that regard, my sob story, if you will, which is uh, the reason that I was able to kind of have a successful career and get to this point, was that I did a techno MBA at Fairfax, George Mason University. And here we are, it's about 94, 93, and there was a big recession after the first Gulf War. here I am with a master's degree, and the only job that I could take was as a marketing assistant for $28,000. Well, my colleagues in the class were all kind of getting jobs at Booz Allen and Deloitte and, PwC and EY and all these companies.
Sounds good.
My self, my God, my story really kind of started when I realized that the telecommunication industry and the internet was about to explode. I had an undergraduate degree from Temple University, which I finished in 2.5 years because I couldn't afford not taking 12 credits when the university basically pays for 17 on the same tuition bill. So I was very motivated because I didn't have that extra money to actually finish the degree. And then I got a techno MBA from George Mason University in Fairfax, Virginia. And lo and behold, it was the recession of 1993 and 1994. And the only job I could get with all this knowledge and master's degree that saw the future coming and how business is going to be integrated with the whole economy as a technology sector, I really kind of could only get a job as a marketing assistant for $28,000. I took that job because we had to pay the bills in a studio apartment. My wife at the time was doing her PhD in clinical psychology, which is an 8-year program with no income. We had a research assistantship, and it was too expensive. So after a year working for a telecommunication company, where I got promoted very quickly to be kind of the writer for the CEO and the president because they felt that I was actually listening. A funny story here is I was basically hated by a lot of people on the main floor, headquarters, because every time the president or the CEO or the vice president will pass by my cubicle, I would actually write down their idea or jot down what they said and put a sticky note on my cubicle. So I had 1,000 sticky notes where Bill said that, Dan said that, and then everybody else saying, why are you listening to what they're saying? And I said, well, if you don't listen, how are you going to learn? Or most importantly, if you're not following their lead, you're not doing the right thing. With that in mind, I very much wanted to also be an entrepreneur. And part of being an entrepreneur is knowing that you have to accept a lot of difficulty starting. So I said, in order to succeed, I can't compete against big agencies and big company with huge marketing staff. But what I can do is niche the market to a point where we're going to be swimming in a smaller pond and have an opportunity to kind of catch clients like CEOs of small to mid-sized companies that had the issue of not having marketing at all, or didn't understand what marketing does, or didn't really understand how that parlays itself into communicating to your existing base or communicating it to get publicity, all the things that we call branding, marketing, and PR, but focused on technology companies. So making a long story short, we started with one employee, which was me, and I made the choice to call the company the Borenstein Group because I knew that if I called the Borenstein Group, nobody's going to ask how many people work for you. Which, when you're a solo entrepreneur and start a company, I wanted to be associated more with the Yankee Group, the Boston Group, that kind of high brand recognition organizations that are more on the smart side of branding versus the traditional creative agency, big idea, and really to take the tagline, making creativity a science, and then connect the dots to say, this is how we're different. And then, lo and behold, I started by ending my $28,000 career of 1.5 years. And then launched the Borenstein Group with a budget of $600, which basically went to printing a trifold brochure. And because I didn't know where I'm going to be next in terms of kind of moving offices and shared offices and executive offices, I made sure that there's 4 slits inside the brochure where I can change the business card only and save money by doing so as we move locations. So if I was in this place for a year, all I had to do is reprint just the business cards versus have another big expense. And the funniest story is that wasn't enough, of course, to start. So here I am getting one of those direct mail Visa, MasterCard convenience checks, which on the front to say free money, there's no obligation, just pay it on time, $2,000, which was a lot of money to me because I didn't have any rich family members or any of kind of the traditional things that people have. So I signed it, only to realize a day later that in the small letters right behind the other side of the check, it said, and when you cash it, it's $500 every time you cash that convenience check. And most importantly, it's an APR of like 30%. So that motivated me to say, I can't be in that position. I got to win. Interestingly enough, what happened was the value proposition of the company connected in my head the fact that a lot of those tech companies don't have effective marketing because they're treating the whole side of business as kind of a receptionist desk, if you will. That's the line that I used to get the first probably 10 or 20 clients, which is I would meet a CEO in a networking event or in a CEO club as a guest. And then I would really kind of talk to them about the fact that if they could afford everything that they wanted to, will they do it? And will they give me a chance? And most people said, well, it's too expensive. And they said, well, think about your receptionist. How much are you paying your receptionist? And the receptionist typically at that time was kind of $18,000 to $25,000. So I said, what if you get a combination of services, which is the equivalent of what we call now service level agreements, right? Give them a bronze, silver, and a gold that they can pick from. And then we can always do more, but let's get going and let's get your company in a position to be successful. So we charge less than what a receptionist costs. And I was happy. In my dream was that I would have $56,000 in the first year, but instead I had $150,000 in the first year. And then I started needing to hire freelancers and then full-time employees. And then suddenly bigger companies heard of us and said, we want to pick a company that we can work with on a personal level. We don't want a junior out of college to handle our account because we're not spending $1 million. And that's really kind of gave us an understanding and kind of an emotional IQ and a generational IQ, if you will, for the lifetime of the company, that CEOs are human beings and leaders, even when they have a specialty or, some kind of a talent like reading the room in a way that nobody does, emotional intelligence, IQ, they really still need help. And most of them won't admit that they need that help. And the worst thing is when they go to get help from their own vice presidents, very often the answer is they're only going to give you what you want to hear versus what you need to hear. And that's kind of the value add that throughout the 30 plus years of the Borenstein Group became kind of the beacon, if you will, and the mantra is, we work with CEOs, we work with leaders, and we don't give them like kind of a sweetheart version of what the issues are. We show them how to solve it, how to identify it, how to make the problem into something that gives them tools to be successful when it repeats itself. And then make it all nice, because that's what branding is about when you go to the outside.
Gal, you kind of summed up through sharing your story just what I really enjoy about these conversations is just the founder story scaled. You know, the sharing the stories and the systems that scale founders beyond themselves and what becomes a real company. That's really cool. Thank you for sharing. What
Welcome.
inspires you about the work you're doing right now?
What inspires me the most, and really kind of the kind of reason for writing my first out of 5 books, but this one is specific to branding, is called Don't Believe the Hype. And it's all about the fact that at the core of branding now is trust. Trust was always part of, can I trust the brand that I'm buying? I don't care if it's B2B or B2C, whether it's, supermarket chain or Apple. When you get a product with a promise that it works and it does this and that, the feedback was directly coming from consumers that would buy it or won't buy it. And it was as simple as that. And then you go and figure out what was the issue that prevented them from using it. It could be poor design. It doesn't work all the time. But there was a direct narrative and interaction between corporations and leadership and marketing and branding with their target audience. And that's where it stopped. So any one of us would never know whether there's a bigger systemic problem. So here comes COVID and creates 2 or 3 things that really kind of change the way trust is being built and promises are being kept or not being kept. The first was suddenly we're not in the same room in the management team. We're on video calls where half of the people don't even turn on the video on and just have their little circle because they're not comfortable being in video, and it has nothing to do with the company. But it discourages meaningful conversations and going into details, and it's more kind of a sit rep, as they call it in the military, which is such situational report. But it doesn't really give you what else do we need to do or have that interaction that results in learning about your business a little bit more to improve it. So and the second part, COVID really killed a lot of the idea of having everyone in one place, not only for management meetings, but to have a culture of the company. And the dissonance was that the culture of a company that had values like, sustainability, we take care of each other, we have inclusion, whatever the values that were on the wall suddenly disappeared because nobody could follow them and nobody could actually continue to follow them even when COVID was over, and everybody worked now in distributed workforce, remote workforce environments, which meant, again, I don't even have to communicate with you other than using Slack. So I can text you. And while my own 3 boys that are now men working in the workforce, they were born texting. So the context of even leaving a voicemail is something that is a last resort if they can't reach me. But it is a last resort. They will text multiple times. And this Gen Z generation is very much programmed because they were born with the iPhone. Millennials and Gen X are a little bit more traditional in their approach, even when things change. So what happened is, like I said, the promises that were made by a company, no matter what the brand is, were a one-sided narrative that went to the market and made a promise. Were faster, better, cheaper, higher processing power, whatever the technology may be. But the feedback was by buying or people not buying your product or service. So now we have a completely different situation. We are not judged just by our internal narrative in a company. In fact, the control of our narrative and the brand perception is completely hijacked by social media, by product review sites, by chatter about companies' employees that are basically giving bad reviews to the CEO, like on Glassdoor, or they say something like, they promised that we have the great benefits and greatest benefits in the world, and guess what? They suck. They really don't give us any of it. Or I hate my job because there's no training, and I expected training to be successful in my job. And they could be false. They could be disgruntled employees. But when you go to Google and type in the name of a company, and a Glassdoor review comes up third, and then product reviews come in the first 10 items, links, when you're trying to learn about a company. And now with AI, with generative AI, you type in the name of a company and say, is this company a good company? And it will give you the history of lawsuits. It will give you history of failures. And it will give you also fact about the company that aren't quite accurate because they were kind of collecting information. And you really need to verify, by the way, that the AI facts that you presented or got are really coming from that place of accuracy. So, because AI sometimes has hallucinations, and that integrates into the search, which will become the brand perception of your company. You don't control any of it. You don't control what people put in the media, social media specifically. Complaints could be anonymous, which could be written by your competitor or by your disgruntled employees or real customers that believe that what you do is not fulfilling your promise to keep in the marketplace. Really, the idea of trust and how trust broke down as we transition from, think about having a business lunch, having a shaking of the hands, having a phone call where it says, I'll see you tomorrow in the office, and have a management meeting. And then the same with the interaction even in a retail store where you have only one person and they get $12 an hour or $15 an hour, and they know nothing about the products other than they have this kind of technology widget that basically will take your money as quickly as possible. But they have no knowledge which one is better, which product is better, which service is better, which suit is going to fit you better and be modern, or whatever it is that you're trying to do. So what I discovered, and that's really connecting to the 30 years of experience, is trust was always something that I looked upon as, it's not just about having what we call honest communications, but it could become a value proposition, and it can become something that you can monetize. Because if there are two brands and one is trusted and the other one is not trusted, in the past, it was a big deal. But now, in the dynamic of agentic AI, in fake reviews, fake news, and hallucinations, companies that I'm seeing having the FOMO effect of saying, how do I not have AI? I got to have AI because otherwise our company doesn't look good. They're rushing to implement systems that are automating problems and mass replicating them rather than actually solving the issue. And that's really why I wrote the book, because I wanted people, especially in leadership, to understand the difference between being known as an innovator, which is what AI brings to anything right now. And, if you want your evaluation to be higher in the private sector, bring AI into your product, even if it does something that costs $10. But the valuation now went from 6x to 12x, right? And then internally within companies, creating innovation and creating value proposition that allows these companies, when they're traded in the stock market, they look like they're doing a lot better in the innovation station, if you will. So I looked at the issue where trust is no longer just a thing that you got to have, but it's the one thing that you need to monetize, and you cannot treat it as just an extra thing. You need to basically rearrange your thinking around, do I trust my employees? Do my employees trust me if I'm a CEO? What is the internal corporate culture? For example, imagine when Boeing went through this huge calamity where somebody reported about some parts, but the communication culture did not allow for the information to get fast enough to the manufacturing part of the operation. And then a plane crashed. And it didn't crash because the CEO wasn't a nice guy or the employees were great. It was a failure to communicate, and it wasn't part of the values of the brand. So we went from Boeing equals safety to Boeing, I'm not sure, maybe we should look at Airbus. And that is monetizing the trust. And they had to spend 2 or 3 years, millions of dollars just to get to a 0 point or kind of a beginning, because they didn't pay attention to that. And they thought about it as quality assurance. Yes, it is quality assurance in technical details, but the outcome of it is the outside world now sees with an X-ray what's going on within your company. And they're a publicly traded company, which makes it 100 times worse than if you're a private company. So I built kind of a trust framework for leadership that I call the Guardian. And it really is about thinking about leadership in the ELT, in the executive leadership room. Do people give you the right answers, or do they give you the answers that you want to hear? Second, are you communicating with the middle management or the program manager, the people that are in the field that actually know what's going on? And do they believe in the same things that you believe as a CEO or leader, or a senior leader in vice president community, or program manager? It doesn't matter. Project managers. It doesn't match with the promises that we're making to the marketplace. And then the most important part, as a CEO and a leader, are you actually listening to what people are saying about the company on the outside? And does any of it make sense and connects to why we're not selling more? Why is our reputation not exceeding expectations when we get the best performance reviews by a magazine that tests our speed or our sophistication or our database? And essentially, internal leadership has to believe and create the values. Then middle management has to believe in those values to execute it. And then the people that are on the floor, the shop, where you actually do the work, and the shop could be, your staff or a manufacturer. If they don't believe in the same promise that you made to the CEO and leader, they brush it aside, or they basically don't prioritize it. And then the result of it is, when the promise comes out, it does not match what you're selling. And now you have a narrative that is no longer controlled by what you promised. Open up anybody to kill it. So it's about brand resiliency. And in my experience, working with hundreds of CEOs over the years, it was a given in their mind that they have a trusted product or service. Makes sense, right? We don't wake up in the morning and want to screw up. Nobody wakes up and says, I want to kill my own business or my brand. But the reality is that now your brand can be killed really quickly because of crisis communications. And if you look at it just as crisis communications, that doesn't address the issues of the promise that you make and the kind of DNA of the company, you're likely to have a disconnect. And when you do have a promise that you think is great to the marketplace, for example, our cybersecurity software is the best software. Nobody can hack it. In fact, try it. Nobody can hack that software. And then you give it to the ad agency or the branding agency or the PR agency. They're going with what you're telling them. They're not testing the cybersecurity software, whether it can be hackable or not. And there are multiple examples of cybersecurity being a real monetized issue around trust with the companies that are holding databases and governance of data that completely screws up. Victoria's Secret had that problem this year, where there was a huge leak of database of people's emails and names. And I'm sure when it's Victoria's Secret, not everybody wants to be a customer on, You Got Pawned, which is the place where you can see if your information was compromised. And the same happened also to a company that really kind of focused on looking at the marketplace from an athletic shoes, Under Armour, and then only find out that they got hacked so badly that more than just names and emails, entire chatbots were exposed. And people look at it and say, that's a technology problem. I look at it and say, no, that's your brand promise. The privacy is part of the agreement that you're making with a group of customers and a group of employees and a group of management to deliver something that lives up to the expectation. And right now, at this moment, it might change in a week or two, if you basically have a hackable company and the expectation of consumers to have data privacy and data governance, that's something that you have to take care of. And while there's no guarantee that it won't happen to you, you can pretty much guarantee that if you have a rapid response team that actually understands that this is about your brand and about your reputation versus about what the cybersecurity company that you hired didn't do, you have a much better chance of being successful in telling what happened and then getting in front of the news, which is what crisis communication is about. Because the story is going to blow up anyway, but if you have your own narrative before the news goes out and people are trashing you, you have a much higher chance of being successful. And that's why kind of the bottom line of the book and the bottom line of why I focus on trust always in branding, but now 100x more, because now we're losing control over our messaging, even internally, with agentic AI. And agentic AI is great. Don't get me wrong. I use it. Everybody that I know uses it. Most people have a really good productivity outcome out of it. But if you don't have a human being that understands customer service, understand what the real issues are with prospects that need to be converted into customers, you're testing sales messages and you have a typo that nobody noticed, and then that goes out to 100,000 people instead of the maybe 100 people that it used to be when a business developer just would sit down and kind of type an email, right? So what we're doing right now, we're replicating, mass replicating, and creating agents that are supposed to replace human judgment. And they can't replace human judgment. They can tell you that you got 25% more response rate, but do you want 25% response rate that says this sucks or this doesn't work, or I opened it because I wanted to see what it said, but does not sits well with your kind of your trusted brand. So it's about brand resilience in the new age.
Definitely. The attention economy met by the trust recession, right? Uh,
Yes, it's a really good way of looking at it.
Thank you. Yeah, Gal, I would love for you to give, excuse me,
Take 8.
excuse me. Gal, I would love for you to take 2 minutes and give, if you had a founder sitting in front of you, whether it's founders that are building their own business or if it's your direct client, if you could take 2 minutes and give them your number one piece of advice for success to win today, kind of building off of what you just touched on. Anything come to mind there?
Absolutely. And luckily, I didn't have to make this up by myself. Jeff Bezos, who everybody knows as Mr. Amazon, was asked once, "What is branding?" And his answer was, "It's what people say about you when you're not in the room. It's what people say about you when you're not in the room." Now, if you're a leader, the first question that you need to ask is, what do people say about us when we're not in the room? The room is a metaphor, of course, to anything in your organization. And then the second thing you got to do is benchmark the things that are working and things that are not working from a reputational perspective. And then compare it to your peers in your competitive environment. And then create an index. And it could be as simple as picking one issue that, is bothering everybody inside the company and out about a product. Like, for example, it works really well, but it looks like crap. Could be an app on your phone. And make sure that you can create what I call a trust index. And it could be as simple as saying, right now we're at a 3. Our goal in the leadership team is to be at an 8 in this particular attribute. When it comes to our company values, we need to index how believable they are for our employees, because a culture that doesn't believe in itself is not likely to be amenable to change. And third, listen to the street. And listen to the street has to do with uh, creating social media proof on your end proactively that communicates with the audience. You can't be hiding anymore or having one press release on your website from 2019, which happened with a client that I took. And that was the first thing that I saw. And I said, "You guys are in 2026. How is that possible that nobody put a press release?" He said, "Well, we didn't think it was important." And it was very important and is very important. Perception. So finally, takes very seriously even anonymous reviews and bad reviews and fake reviews, because you don't control the way by which you can wage a war against it. Your natural instinct as a leader is to say, "Let's sue them. Let's do a lawsuit," or HR. Let's write kind of a response that says, we don't know what your name is, so you made it up." You have to take a different approach that start by saying, this is the new world that we live in. This is how we build a trusted brand that people will be able to talk about in a positive way when we're not in the room, as Amazon found it.
We've covered a lot of ground today. Anything I should have asked you, Gal? Anything you want to touch on?
Well, I would love to share with the audience the 2 books that I wrote. Don't Believe the Hype is for the leadership that listens to your show. And the second one is calling Beating Goliath with AI. And it takes kind of a reverse role of thinking about small to mid-size companies where the owners are really kind of integrating AI, but they don't know how to integrate it into their core business. And it's about giving the idea that we're the Davids, and sometimes there's like a big competitor in your industry. Like, imagine being kind of a supplier and that tries to kind of have a war with Home Depot or Costco or Walmart, and you think there's nothing you can do. So we're kind of the Davids in that situation, and they're the Goliaths, if you will. So this book really provides some digital slingshots, things that can be done to unravel your competition legally, and most importantly, in a very savvy way that takes advantage of what AI can give you, which is intelligence, data, and do it in the right way. So you don't have to do everything. You don't have to rush it, but having 3 or 4 tools in the war for survival against the big guys, you got to do it. And you can find it on Amazon.com. And if you want to link up with me, go to LinkedIn and connect with me, Gal Borenstein. And I'll be happy to exchange some views and provide advice. And for your listeners for this show, I'm going to be offering an ebook version of both books. Just need to get in touch and mention the name of the podcast. And I'll be happy to share the knowledge.
Thank you, Gal. Appreciate that. And we can make sure we have any information necessary there in the show notes, of course. Before we wrap, I guess one last question for you. Gal, what do you want the people you've worked with to say about the impact you had on them?
That I was a contrarian. Success came through challenging the conventions, not listening to people that said it can't be done. In fact, go through that wall. My dad used to say, which is probably not something that anybody would say to their kids now, but he said, if there is a challenge that you have in front of you, it's like take your head, your forehead, and bang your head against the wall, and you'll forget what problem you had because now you're bleeding. And in his own way, it really parlayed in my mind to say you can make a hole in the wall that will allow you to see the next destination by thinking in a way where you don't give up, you don't take stuff for granted that people tell you, because typically they're not exactly what they say they are. And most importantly, always think about a way to become a trusted advisor to your clients, which means it's not about being a vendor. A vendor does exactly what you ask them to do, which in the supply chain might be the right thing to do. But working with CEOs and working with leadership of companies, small, medium, and large, the role that I kind of try to train everybody and give them examples, it really is about the fact that a trusted advisor gives you the bad news and the good news. And if they're only giving you good news, they suck.
Well said. It's an important statement. Gal Borenstein, a Borenstein Group. Thank you for joining Flywheel Leadership. We appreciate you sharing.
Thank you so much for having me.
Take care.